Welcome, dear listeners, to another powerful episode of the English Globe podcast. We're so glad you've joined us today for a topic that is not only fascinating, but also incredibly important for understanding how the world works. Wherever you're listening from, whether you're at home, at work, walking in the park, or sitting on a bus, we're here to bring you an English learning experience that also opens your eyes to global issues.
That's right, Adam. And today's episode is truly eye-opening. Our topic is who controls the world's oil? The hidden war for energy. This is not just about gas stations or oil barrels. It's about how oil shapes the world. Oil is behind the power of nations, the rise and fall of economies, and even the beginning of wars. It controls transportation, industry, and even the way governments make big decisions. Oil is not just fuel. It is power.
Oil is deeply connected to politics, money, and control. Many powerful countries and companies fight, sometimes secretly and sometimes openly, for control of oil. This war is not always shown on TV, but it's happening every day. When you turn on the news and hear about a conflict in the Middle East, tension between countries, or even the rise of fuel prices, oil is usually at the center of it. That's why we call it the hidden war for energy.
Before we go deeper into today's episode, we kindly ask all of you to like this video and subscribe to the English Globe YouTube channel. Your support helps us grow and keep creating powerful podcasts like this one. We truly appreciate each of you who listens, learns, and shares. And we'd love to hear from you. Please tell us in the comments where you are listening from. Are you in Africa, Asia, Europe, the Americas? Let us know.
Yes, let us know where in the world you're joining us from, and we'd also love to hear your thoughts on this topic. What do you think about the power of oil? Do you believe countries should go to war or interfere in others' affairs just to control oil? Is it fair that a few countries and companies dominate the world's energy supply? Share your ideas, your questions, and your feelings in the comment section. Your voice matters.
Oil might seem like something far away from our daily lives, but it's not. The car you drive, the plane you take, the plastic products you use, even the electricity in some countries, all of these depend on oil. Without oil, our world would stop moving. That's why powerful governments, giant companies, and global leaders are constantly working, sometimes secretly, to keep control over this resource. And that's what we will explore in this episode.
We'll take you through history, politics, economics, and global conflicts. You will learn how oil was discovered, how it changed the world, and how it became the center of international power struggles. From the rise of oil empires to wars in oil-rich regions, from the creation of global oil alliances to the secret deals behind closed doors, we're going to cover it all. And we'll do it in simple English so that learners at every level can follow.
This podcast is not just about practicing English. It's about becoming more informed and aware of how the world works. Oil is not just a product. It is a force that drives nations. And when we understand who controls that force, we begin to see global news, politics, and even our daily lives in a whole new way. This is what makes today's topic one of the most important we've ever shared with you.
So sit back, relax, or keep walking if you're on the move, and get ready for a powerful journey through oil, power, and politics. You'll discover how countries use oil as a weapon, how oil prices can change the lives of millions, and why this war for energy is often hidden from the public. You'll also see how the future of oil may be changing, and how that could affect the balance of power in the world.
Thank you once again for being with us today. We're excited to have this conversation with you. Remember to like this video, subscribe to our channel, tell us where you're listening from, and share your opinions in the comments. Your feedback is what keeps us going. Now, in the next section, we'll go back in time to explore the history of oil, how it was discovered, how it became powerful, and how it began shaping the modern world. Before we can understand who controls oil today, we need to travel back in time and see where it all began. Oil may seem like a modern resource, but its history goes back thousands of years. Ancient people in the Middle East especially in present-day Iraq and Iran, used oil in small amounts. They found it bubbling on the surface of the earth and used it to seal boats, waterproof buildings, and even for medicine or lighting fires.
Yes, Julia, but the real story of oil's global power began in the 19th century. In 1859, in a place called Titusville, Pennsylvania, a man named Edwin Drake drilled the first successful modern oil well. This was a turning point in history because it showed that oil could be pulled from underground in large quantities. This new discovery was not just scientific, it was economic. It created an entirely new industry and started what we now call the oil age.
After that discovery, oil drilling spread fast. Companies were formed and towns were built around oil wells. Suddenly, oil was not just something from the ground. It was money, it was jobs, and it was power. The first big oil company that truly changed the world was Standard Oil, founded by John D. Rockefeller in the United States. He became one of the richest men in history by controlling the oil supply in America during the late 1800s and early 1900s.
Rockefeller's company was so powerful that it controlled about 90% of the oil market in the United States. This control allowed him to decide prices and destroy competition. People started to realize that whoever controls oil controls more than just energy. They control transportation, industry, and even politics. Governments around the world saw this and began taking oil seriously. It was no longer just business. It was now national interest.
The importance of oil became even clearer in the 20th century, especially during the First and Second World Wars. Countries needed oil to power tanks, planes, ships, and other war machines. Suddenly, oil was a military necessity. Leaders realized that having oil could mean victory, and not having oil could mean defeat. This changed everything. Oil fields became battlefields, and controlling oil meant controlling the outcome of wars.
One famous example is during World War II. The German army, led by Adolf Hitler, needed oil badly. Much of their strategy was focused on capturing oil fields in places like the Soviet Union and the Middle East. The Japanese also invaded countries in Asia that had oil, like Indonesia. At the same time, the Allies, especially the United States and the United Kingdom, understood the value of oil and protected their own supplies carefully.
After the war, oil became even more important. The world was rebuilding and economies were growing fast. Cars became common, airplanes increased in number, and cities started to use more electricity. All of this needed oil. This is the period when the world's oil demand exploded. More oil fields were discovered in the Middle East, especially in Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, and Kuwait. These countries quickly became central players in the oil world.
Western countries, especially the United States and the United Kingdom, made deals with these oil-rich nations. Big oil companies, often called the Seven Sisters, were created. These companies included names like Exxon, Shell, and BP. They controlled huge amounts of oil and made massive profits. But the countries where the oil was located often got very little of the money. This made many people angry and led to future problems.
In the 1960s, something big happened. Several oil-producing countries decided they had enough of being controlled by foreign companies. They wanted more power over their own oil. So they formed a group called OPEC, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. The goal of OPEC was to unite oil-producing countries and give them the ability to control oil prices and production, instead of letting foreign companies decide everything.
OPEC started with 5 members: Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela. Over time, more countries joined. For the first time, oil-producing nations had a voice and could say no to the powerful Western oil companies. In the 1970s, OPEC shocked the world by using oil as a weapon. They reduced oil supply during political conflicts, especially during the Yom Kippur War, which led to a global energy crisis. Prices went up. and people around the world felt the impact.
This was a wake-up call for the world. Everyone realized just how dependent they were on oil and how quickly their lives could change if oil became expensive or unavailable. It was not just about fuel anymore. It was about control, politics, and survival. From that moment on, governments started to include oil in their foreign policies, and oil became one of the most powerful tools in international relations.
But the story didn't end there. After the 1970s, oil continued to play a major role in the rise and fall of countries. Wars were fought over oil. Dictators stayed in power because of oil money. Countries formed alliances to protect oil routes, and oil companies grew even richer and more influential. Some even say that oil companies became more powerful than the governments themselves. That's how deeply oil was embedded in the world system.
So, as we can see, the history of oil is not just about machines or factories. It's about power, war, and control. It shows how something buried under the ground can change the destiny of nations. In the next part of our podcast, we will take a closer look at OPEC and the idea of oil as a cartel. How does this group operate? What power do they have? And can they really control the global price of oil? Stay tuned to find out.
Now that we've learned how oil became a global force, let's talk about something very important in the world of oil: OPEC. You may have heard this word in the news or seen it when fuel prices go up or down. OPEC stands for the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. It was created in 1960 by 5 countries: Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela. These countries had one goal: to take back control of their oil.
Yes, Adam, before OPEC existed, most oil-rich countries had very little power over their own resources. Big oil companies from the West, mainly American and British, controlled everything. They decided how much oil would be produced, how it would be priced, and how much profit they would take. The countries that actually had the oil were not benefiting much. OPEC was created to change this situation and give power back to the oil-producing nations.
At first, not everyone paid attention to OPEC, but slowly, more countries joined the group, and their voice grew louder. By the 1970s, OPEC had enough members to influence the global oil market. Some of its members included Algeria, Nigeria, Libya, the United Arab Emirates, and later Angola and others. These were all countries with rich oil resources, and when they worked together, they could control a large part of the world's oil supply.
The moment when OPEC showed its real power came in 1973. That year, during a conflict in the Middle East, OPEC decided to cut oil production as a political protest. It was during the Yom Kippur War, when some Arab countries were in conflict with Israel. Because Western countries supported Israel, OPEC's Arab members responded by reducing oil exports to those nations. This led to what we now call the 1973 oil crisis.
The impact was huge. In the United States and Europe, oil prices rose sharply. People waited in long lines to fill their cars with fuel. Factories slowed down, transportation became more expensive, and inflation went up. For the first time, Western nations realized how much power OPEC had. This was a turning point. Oil was not just a commodity anymore. It was a political weapon, and OPEC had learned how to use it effectively.
After that, oil became a key topic in global politics. Governments began treating oil as a matter of national security. They built emergency reserves, signed new oil deals, and even changed their foreign policies. OPEC became a major player on the world stage. Every time OPEC held a meeting to discuss oil prices, the entire world paid attention. The group could raise or lower oil prices simply by deciding how much oil to produce.
So how does OPEC actually work? It's quite interesting. OPEC members meet regularly to decide how much oil each country should produce. If they produce more, oil becomes cheaper because there is more supply. If they produce less, oil becomes more expensive because it is harder to get. This balance allows OPEC to influence the price of oil globally. They don't control all the oil in the world, but they control enough to move the market.
But it's not always easy. OPEC members don't always agree. Each country has its own needs and goals. Some want to produce more oil to earn more money quickly. Others want to keep prices high, even if it means producing less. There have been many times when OPEC members broke the rules and produced more than they were allowed. This causes tension within the group and makes it harder for OPEC to act as one voice.
Another challenge OPEC faces is the rise of non-OPEC producers. Countries like the United States, Canada, and Russia produce a lot of oil, but are not part of OPEC. When OPEC cuts production to raise prices, these non-OPEC countries often increase their production to take advantage of the higher prices. This weakens OPEC's control over the market. That's why, in recent years, OPEC has tried to work with non-OPEC countries in a group called OPEC+.
OPEC Plus includes major oil producers like Russia, Kazakhstan, and Mexico. By working together, these countries try to manage global oil supply more effectively. This alliance has had mixed results, but it shows how complicated the global oil market has become. It's no longer just about one group of countries. It's about many different players, each with their own interests, trying to influence the same market.
Some people criticize OPEC and say it acts like a cartel. A cartel is a group that works together to control prices in a market, which is usually considered unfair or even illegal. But OPEC defends itself by saying it only tries to stabilize prices and protect the interests of oil-producing countries. Whether it is a cartel or not, one thing is clear. OPEC is powerful. Its decisions can affect millions of people around the world.
For example, when OPEC decides to reduce oil production, you might notice that fuel becomes more expensive in your country. Your electricity bill may go up. Flights may become more costly. Inflation might rise. Oil prices affect the price of food, transportation, plastic products, and many other things. So, even if you don't live in an OPEC country, you are still affected by what OPEC does.
That's why world leaders, economists, and even ordinary people pay attention to OPEC meetings. When these countries sit down to talk about oil, the whole world watches. Financial markets react immediately. Stock prices go up or down, currencies change in value, and news channels begin discussing what it all means. OPEC's influence shows how oil is deeply connected to every part of the global economy.
But with great power comes great responsibility. OPEC has also been blamed for keeping oil prices high, which can hurt poor countries and cause global economic problems. Some say OPEC puts its own profits ahead of the needs of the world. Others argue that it's only fair for oil-producing nations to earn more from their resources. The debate continues, and there is no simple answer. What do you think, dear listeners? Let us know in the comments.
That's right. Do you think OPEC is helping to stabilize the world oil market? Or do you believe it creates more problems than it solves? Should all countries come together to manage oil fairly? Or is competition better? These are important questions that affect us all. Remember to share your views in the comments and tell us where you are listening from. We always enjoy reading your thoughts.
In our next section, we're going to take a closer look at one of the biggest players in the oil world, the United States. How did America become so powerful in oil? What is the connection between US foreign policy and energy control? And how has oil influenced America's role as a global superpower? Get ready for a deep dive into the US and oil politics in the next part of our journey.
So far, we've talked about how oil became a global power and how OPEC changed the way oil is controlled. But now we must focus on one of the most powerful players in the oil world, the United States. Even though OPEC holds a lot of oil reserves, no conversation about global oil would be complete without discussing how America uses oil to shape its economy, foreign policy, and even its military power on the global stage.
That's right, Adam. The story of oil in the United States begins in the 19th century, just like we discussed earlier with Edwin Drake and the first modern oil well. Over time, the United States became one of the world's top producers of oil. But by the mid-20th century, its domestic oil production started to decline. At the same time, demand for oil kept rising. This forced the US to import more oil from countries in the Middle East and beyond.
This growing dependency on foreign oil made U.S. leaders worried. They realized that relying too much on other countries for something so important could create big problems. If foreign oil supplies were suddenly cut off, the American economy could suffer badly. That's why oil became not only an economic issue, but a national security issue. In fact, many U.S. military and political strategies were built around protecting access to oil.
A clear example of this can be seen in the U.S. relationship with Saudi Arabia. After World War II, America and Saudi Arabia developed a very close partnership. The U.S. agreed to protect Saudi Arabia's ruling family and military interests, while Saudi Arabia promised to supply oil to the global market in a stable way. This was not just about friendship, it was a strategic move. Oil was the foundation of their relationship.
The U.S. also helped Saudi Arabia sell oil in dollars, which led to the creation of the petrodollar system. This meant that almost all global oil trade was done using U.S. dollars. Because of this, countries around the world had to keep dollars in their banks to buy oil. This increased the demand for the dollar, strengthened the U.S. economy, and gave America an even more powerful position in global trade and finance.
However, this power also came with consequences. In order to protect its access to oil and keep control over oil markets, the United States became involved in many global conflicts. Some of these were direct wars, and others were hidden operations. For example, the U.S. supported or opposed leaders in countries like Iran, Iraq, Libya, and Venezuela, often because of oil interests, even if other reasons were given in public.
Let's take the example of Iran. In 1953, the U.S. and Britain helped remove Iran's Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh from power because he wanted to take control of Iran's oil from foreign companies. This event changed Iran's history forever. It showed that the U.S. was willing to interfere in another country's government if oil was at stake. The same pattern happened in other countries too, especially those with rich oil fields.
In more recent times, we've seen how oil played a role in the wars in Iraq. After the Gulf War in 1991, and especially during the 2003 Iraq War, many people believed that oil was one of the real reasons behind the conflict. The US said it was removing dangerous weapons and protecting freedom, but others said the goal was to gain control of Iraq's large oil reserves and secure influence in a key region of the world.
The U.S. also has a very strong military presence in regions with high oil production. It has bases, ships, and troops positioned in and around the Middle East, especially near the Persian Gulf. This area is one of the most oil-rich zones on Earth. Many experts say that this military presence is not just about fighting terrorism or promoting peace. It's also about protecting oil routes and keeping control over global energy supply.
Another major part of US oil policy is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, or SPR. This is a huge amount of oil stored underground in case of emergencies. If there's ever a major problem, like a war, a natural disaster, or an economic shock, the US can release oil from this reserve to help stabilize prices. This system gives the US an extra layer of security and shows how serious the country is about energy control.
In the past decade, something surprising happened. The United States became the world's largest oil producer again, thanks to new technology like fracking and horizontal drilling. These methods allowed American companies to reach oil trapped deep underground. This boom in oil production made the U.S. less dependent on foreign oil and gave it more freedom to make political and economic decisions without relying so much on the Middle East.
Yes, Adam, this energy boom gave the US a stronger position, but it also caused new problems. Environmental activists warned that fracking could damage water sources and cause earthquakes. Others worried about the impact on climate change. Still, many US leaders were happy to become more energy independent. Some even called it energy dominance, meaning the US not only had enough oil for itself, but could also sell to others.
Despite producing more oil at home, the US still keeps a close eye on global oil flows. It uses sanctions, diplomacy, and even military pressure to influence the behavior of other oil-rich countries. For example, the US placed economic sanctions on countries like Iran and Venezuela, which made it harder for them to sell oil. This was done for political reasons, but it also had a big impact on the oil market and world prices.
So, when we ask the question, who controls oil, we must include the United States as one of the main actors. It may not have the largest oil reserves like Saudi Arabia or Venezuela, but it has the technology, the military strength, the financial systems, and the political influence to shape oil policy around the world. In many ways, America controls oil not by owning it, but by influencing who can sell it, how it's sold, and in what currency.
And now, we want to hear from you, dear listeners. What do you think about the role of the United States in the global oil game? Do you think it uses its power for good, or do you think it uses oil as a tool for control? Should one country have so much influence over such an important resource? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're listening from. We love to hear your ideas and stories.
In the next section, we'll travel to the Middle East, the region that many people call the heart of oil. We'll look at how oil has brought both great wealth and great conflict to countries like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Iran. We'll explore how foreign powers have influenced the region and how oil has shaped politics, religion, and war. You don't want to miss it. See you in the next part of this powerful story.
Now that we've talked about the United States and its global oil strategies, let's turn our focus to a region that many people believe is the true center of the world's oil power, the Middle East. This region is not only rich in oil, but also filled with political tension, conflict, and historical complexity. Understanding oil in the Middle East is key to understanding much of the global energy story and the hidden war for power.
That's absolutely right, Adam. The Middle East holds some of the largest oil reserves on the planet. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Qatar sit on billions of barrels of oil underground. These oil-rich lands have brought massive wealth to some of these nations, but they have also attracted foreign interest, interference, and sometimes even invasion. Oil has made the region powerful, but also vulnerable.
Let's start with Saudi Arabia, often considered the king of oil. It has the second largest proven oil reserves in the world and is the largest oil exporter. Its national oil company, Saudi Aramco, is one of the richest and most valuable companies on earth. For decades, Saudi Arabia has played a central role in OPEC and global oil pricing. It's not just a country, it's an energy superpower with deep ties to both the West and the Islamic world.
But with this oil wealth comes political power and danger. The Saudi royal family has used oil money to build modern cities, provide free services, and maintain control over the country. At the same time, they have faced criticism for human rights issues and a lack of democracy. Many believe that Western countries, especially the US, support Saudi Arabia not because of shared values, but because of oil and strategic influence in the Middle East.
Just across the Gulf from Saudi Arabia is Iran, another major oil player with a very different story. Iran has huge oil and gas reserves, but because of political conflicts, especially with the US and Europe, its oil industry has often been under pressure. Sanctions have limited Iran's ability to sell oil freely, and this has hurt its economy. Still, Iran remains a powerful voice in the region and a strong influence in the energy world.
Iran and Saudi Arabia also have a rivalry that goes beyond oil. They compete for leadership in the Muslim world, with Iran mostly representing Shia Islam and Saudi Arabia representing Sunni Islam. This rivalry has led to proxy conflicts in places like Yemen, Syria, and Lebanon. Behind many of these conflicts is the desire to control influence, and often, oil is quietly at the center of these power struggles, even if it's not openly discussed.
Another key country is Iraq, which has experienced decades of instability, but sits on some of the world's most valuable oil fields. After years of dictatorship under Saddam Hussein, followed by U.S. invasion and civil conflict, Iraq's oil sector is still recovering. Today, oil makes up more than 90% of Iraq's government revenue. Foreign companies from China, Russia, and the West all compete to invest in Iraq's oil, making it a hot zone for global interest.
Let's not forget Kuwait, a small country with a big oil punch. In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait, partly to gain control of its oil reserves. This led to the Gulf War, where a coalition of countries, led by the US, pushed Iraq out of Kuwait. This was one of the clearest examples of oil being a reason for war. The protection of Kuwait's oil wealth was presented as a mission for peace, but many people believed oil was the real motivation.
Other countries like the United Arab Emirates and Qatar have used oil wealth to grow rapidly. They built modern cities like Dubai and Doha, created airlines, and invested globally. But even these countries face challenges. They know oil will not last forever, so they are trying to diversify their economies. This is why you hear about tourism, sports events, and new technology in these countries. They are preparing for a future beyond oil.
One of the most heartbreaking stories in the region is Libya. Libya has rich oil reserves, but after the fall of its longtime leader Muammar Gaddafi, the country has been in chaos. Civil war and foreign intervention have made it difficult for Libya to manage its oil safely. Different groups fight for control over oil fields and ports. Many believe that foreign countries are involved not to bring peace, but to gain control over Libya's energy resources.
What all of these stories show is that oil can be a blessing, but it can also be a curse. In the Middle East, oil has brought wealth and modern life, but it has also brought war, corruption, foreign invasion, and deep political division. The more oil a country has, the more attention it receives, and that attention is not always good. Foreign powers, international companies, and even local leaders often fight not just for the people, but for the oil beneath their feet.
Dear listeners, imagine living in a country where oil is flowing in the ground, but people are still poor. Imagine seeing other countries get involved in your politics and wars, not to help you, but to control the oil. This is the reality for many people in the Middle East. Oil may make the country rich on paper, but it doesn't always lead to peace, freedom, or justice. In some cases, it even leads to the opposite.
That's why the phrase resource curse is often used to describe oil in the Middle East. It means that instead of bringing prosperity, natural resources like oil sometimes bring conflict and inequality. Leaders may use oil wealth to stay in power, ignore reforms, or silence opposition. At the same time, foreign countries might treat the country like a gas station, only caring about the oil, not about the people who live there.
This makes us think about the bigger question. Should oil belong to governments, companies, or the people? In many Middle Eastern countries, the average citizen has little say in how oil wealth is used. Public services might still be weak, unemployment may be high, and political freedom might be limited. Yet the land beneath their feet contains billions of dollars in oil. It's a situation full of complexity and moral questions.
And as global demand for oil continues, the Middle East remains a central point of focus. The world cannot ignore this region, not just because of its oil, but because of its history, religion, culture, and influence. Any disruption in the Middle East, whether a war, a protest, or even a government decision, can shake the global oil market. Prices can rise, stocks can fall, and economies can react quickly, all because of something that happened thousands of miles away.
That's why understanding oil in the Middle East is so important. It's not just about business, it's about life, death, politics, and survival. And now, dear listeners, we want to hear from you. Do you think oil has helped or harmed the Middle East? Should foreign countries stay out of the region, or are they needed to maintain peace and order? What do you think about the future of this oil-rich region? Tell us your thoughts in the comments.
In our next section, we will explore the concept of the petrodollar, one of the most powerful and least understood forces in global economics. We'll explain how oil and the US dollar became connected, how this system gives financial power to certain countries, and why some nations are trying to escape from it. This part will reveal another hidden layer of the energy war you don't want to miss. Now that we've explored the Middle East and how oil has shaped the region, it's time to look at something that connects oil to the global financial system. Today's topic is the petrodollar system, a quiet but powerful structure that gives the United States an advantage in global trade and finance. Many people have heard this word, but don't fully understand what it means. So let's break it down step by step in simple language.
The word petrodollar is made up of two parts: petro, which comes from petroleum or oil, and dollar, which is the US currency. So, petrodollar basically means US dollars that are earned by countries through the sale of their oil. But this system is not just about money. It's about power. It has allowed the United States to influence global oil trade, finance, and even politics without needing to control the oil physically.
To understand how this system began, we need to go back to the early 1970s. At that time, the US economy was facing many problems. Inflation was high, the Vietnam War was expensive, and the value of the US dollar was falling. In 1971, President Richard Nixon made a big decision. He removed the dollar from the gold standard. This meant that the dollar was no longer backed by gold, and its value was based only on trust in the US economy.
This move made many countries nervous. Before this, they believed the dollar was stable because it was tied to gold. After 1971, they began to lose confidence. The US needed a new way to make the dollar strong again, and oil became the answer. In 1974, the United States made a secret agreement with Saudi Arabia, the world's top oil exporter. The deal was simple but powerful. Saudi Arabia would sell its oil only in US dollars.
In return, the United States would provide military protection and help defend Saudi Arabia's royal family. Soon, all of the OPEC countries followed Saudi Arabia's example and started selling their oil only in dollars. This was the birth of the petrodollar system. Now, if any country wanted to buy oil, they had to first get US dollars. This increased the global demand for the dollar and made it the most important currency in the world.
Imagine you're a country like India or Brazil. You want to buy oil from the Middle East. You can't just pay in your local currency. First, you must exchange your money for US dollars. Then, you can buy the oil. This simple rule gives the US a huge advantage. It means that the whole world needs dollars. And because of that, the US can print more dollars without facing the same problems other countries would face if they did the same.
This system helped the US economy in many ways. It allowed America to borrow money at low interest rates, sell government bonds easily, and maintain a strong influence over global finance. Many countries also began storing their wealth in US dollars and buying US debt, which further supported the American economy. The petrodollar system became one of the key foundations of modern global economics, even though most people don't realize it.
But the petrodollar system also created problems. Because it gave so much power to the United States, other countries started to feel uncomfortable. They began asking questions like, why should we always use the dollar to buy oil Why can't we trade in euros, yuan, or our own currencies? Over time, some nations began trying to break away from the petrodollar system. But doing that is not easy because the system is deeply connected to global power.
For example, in the early 2000s, Iraq's leader Saddam Hussein decided to sell oil in euros instead of dollars. Not long after, the US invaded Iraq, saying it was because of weapons of mass destruction. Some people believe oil and the threat to the petrodollar played a secret role in the decision. The same thing happened with Libya. Muammar Gaddafi wanted to create a new African currency backed by gold and use it to sell oil. Shortly after, Libya faced military intervention and chaos.
Of course, there are many reasons why these events happened, and it's hard to say oil was the only reason. But it's clear that when countries challenge the petrodollar system, they often face pressure, economically, politically, or even militarily. The dollar is more than just money. It's a tool of influence, and the US works hard to protect that influence in many ways, both seen and unseen.
Today, the petrodollar system still exists, but it's being challenged more and more. China and Russia are leading the push to create a new system where oil can be traded in other currencies. China has created its own oil futures market priced in yuan, and it has made deals with countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia to accept Chinese currency. This is a big shift, and if it grows, it could reduce the power of the dollar in the long run.
Russia, especially after facing sanctions from the West, has also started trading more oil in rubles and Chinese yuan. Iran has already moved away from the dollar because of US sanctions. These changes are small for now, but they show that the world is moving toward a multi-currency oil market. If that happens, the US may lose some of the advantages it had under the petrodollar system.
The big question is, what happens if the petrodollar system ends? Some experts say it could weaken the US economy. It might lead to inflation, higher debt, and less control over global markets. Others say the world needs a fairer system, where no one country has too much power just because of its currency. Whatever the answer, one thing is certain. The petrodollar system is one of the most important but hidden parts of the global energy war.
So, dear listeners, what do you think? Should oil always be sold in US dollars, or should countries be free to trade in any currency they choose? Do you think the petrodollar system is fair, or is it just another way to control the world economy? And what do you think will happen if more countries move away from the dollar? We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave your comments and let us know where you're listening from.
In the next section, we will look at how oil companies, especially large private and state-owned corporations, play a role in the hidden war for energy. Who are the major players? How much power do they have? And are they helping or harming the planet? This will open your eyes to the secret battles between governments and corporations. Stay tuned as we continue our journey into the world of oil and control. We've explored governments, the Middle East, and even the global money system. But now it's time to look at another powerful part of the oil story: big oil companies. These companies are not just businesses that sell oil. They are some of the most powerful organizations in the world. They influence politics, shape economies, and sometimes even act like governments themselves. Their role in the global oil system is massive and often hidden from the public eye.
Yes, Adam. When people think about oil, they usually picture gas stations or maybe oil fields. But behind all of that are huge multinational corporations, many of which have been around for more than 100 years. Companies like ExxonMobil, Chevron, BP, British Petroleum, Shell, and Total Energies are some of the biggest names. These are called international oil companies, or IOCs, and they operate all over the world.
These companies don't just work in their own countries. They have oil projects in Africa, the Middle East, Asia, South America, and even the Arctic. They explore for oil, drill it, refine it, and sell it across the globe. And because oil is so valuable, these companies earn billions of dollars every year. For example, in some years, ExxonMobil's profits have been higher than the GDP of small countries. That's how big they are.
But there's another group of powerful oil players, the national oil companies, or NOCs. These are state-owned companies controlled by governments. Some of the biggest NOCs include Saudi Aramco, Saudi Arabia, Gazprom, Russia, CNPC, China, and the National Iranian Oil Company. Together, these companies control more than 80% of the world's oil reserves. They don't answer to shareholders. They answer to presidents and kings.
So what happens when these giants, both private and government-owned, compete or cooperate? That's when oil becomes more than just business. It becomes politics. Sometimes these companies work together on massive projects, like drilling in deep oceans or building pipelines across continents. Other times, they fight for market share and influence, and many times, they use their money and connections to influence governments.
For example, oil companies often spend millions of dollars lobbying politicians. In the United States, oil and gas companies give huge donations to political campaigns. They also pay lobbyists to speak to lawmakers and push for laws that protect their profits. This means that even in democratic countries, oil companies can shape energy policy, tax laws, and environmental rules to benefit themselves.
And it's not just about money. These companies also have major influence over media and education. Some fund research at universities, others sponsor news programs or sports events to improve their public image. This helps them stay popular, even when people are concerned about pollution or climate change. They know how to control the conversation and protect their power by appearing friendly or responsible.
But behind the scenes, the picture is more complex. Oil companies have been involved in scandals, bribery, and even violence. In some developing countries, local people have protested because oil companies damage their land or water. In Nigeria, for example, oil spills by big companies have destroyed entire villages, while local communities remain poor. In some cases, activists who spoke out were even arrested or killed.
One of the most famous cases was in the 1990s, when Nigerian writer and activist Ken Saro-Wiwa protested against oil pollution in the Niger Delta. He was arrested and later executed by the Nigerian government. Many believe that oil interests were behind the decision. This shows how oil companies, when working with governments, can become part of systems that silence voices and ignore human rights.
Another major issue is tax avoidance. Some oil companies make billions in profit, but pay very little tax in the countries where they operate. They use legal tricks and offshore banks to move their money around. This means poor countries with oil don't always benefit as much as they should. The oil is taken, sold, and the money often leaves the country. Local people may see little improvement in their lives.
Now, let's talk about power in numbers. Some oil companies are bigger than governments. For example, Saudi Aramco is so rich that it could fund the entire healthcare system of a country like France for years. ExxonMobil's revenues in some years are larger than the entire economy of nations like Denmark or Portugal. When companies become this powerful, they stop acting like normal businesses. They start shaping the world.
Of course, these companies also argue that they provide jobs, help build infrastructure, and power the world's economy. And to be fair, this is partly true. Oil is still needed for transportation, industry, and even electricity in many parts of the world. But the question is, how much power is too much? When companies become too large and connected to governments, it becomes hard to hold them accountable.
Some critics say that we now live in a kind of oil oligarchy, a world where a small group of companies and countries control a massive part of the global system. They decide where pipelines go, how much oil is produced, what price we pay at the pump, and even what wars are fought. The average person has little control or knowledge of what's happening behind closed doors.
But things are changing. With rising awareness about climate change, some people are demanding more responsibility from oil companies. Governments and activists are asking companies to reduce pollution, invest in clean energy, and be more transparent. Some companies have made promises to move toward greener energy, like wind or solar. But many people wonder if these promises are real or just public relations.
Also, as more countries move toward electric cars and renewable energy, big oil companies are starting to worry about the future. If oil demand drops, their profits could fall. That's why they are trying to control the green energy market too. Some are buying wind farms, solar companies, or battery technologies. They don't want to lose their power. They want to stay in control, even in a new energy world.
So the big question is, should we trust these companies to lead the energy transition? Or should we demand stronger rules from governments and more participation from the public? Should oil be controlled by private companies, national governments, or the people themselves? And how can we stop the corruption, pollution, and inequality that so often comes with oil power?
These are big questions, dear listeners. We would love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about oil companies? Do they help or hurt the world? Are they doing enough to fight climate change? Should they have less power, or do we still need them for the global economy to function? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to share where you're listening from.
In our next section, we'll look at another rising force in the global oil game: China. How is China changing the oil market? What is the Belt and Road Initiative? And is China creating a new energy world that challenges the old Western system? Stay tuned as we continue our journey into one of the most important and least understood stories of our time.
As we continue our journey into the hidden world of oil, it's time to focus on a new superpower that is playing a bigger and bigger role in global energy: China. Over the last 2 decades, China has grown from a developing country into the world's second-largest economy. With this rapid rise, its demand for oil has also increased. Today, China is the largest importer of crude oil in the world. That fact alone tells us how big its role has become.
Yes, Adam. China doesn't produce enough oil to meet its needs, so it must buy huge amounts from other countries. Every day it imports millions of barrels of oil, mostly from the Middle East, Africa, and Russia. Oil is needed to fuel its cars, airplanes, ships, factories, and power plants. Without oil, China's economy would slow down. That's why energy security is one of China's top national priorities. It sees oil not just as a product, but as a source of power and protection.
To make sure it never runs out of energy, China has created a long-term strategy. At the center of this strategy is something called the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. This is a massive global project launched by Chinese President Xi Jinping in 2013. The goal is to build new trade routes, roads, railways, ports, and pipelines that connect China with Asia, Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. And behind many of these routes is one key goal: energy access.
Let's explain that in a simple way. Imagine China is at the center of a big web. Each line of the web is a pipeline, a road, or a shipping lane that connects it to other countries. These connections allow China to import oil and gas safely and cheaply. They also allow China to invest in foreign oil fields, refineries, and power plants. By building this web, China is trying to protect its energy supply for decades to come, even in times of global conflict or trade wars.
One clear example of this is in Central Asia. China has built pipelines that bring oil and gas directly from Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan into Western China. These pipelines are safer than shipping oil by sea, where U.S. Navy ships could block the route. In the Indian Ocean, China has invested heavily in ports in Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and Myanmar, some of which are close to major oil shipping routes. These ports help China create a network of supply points that support its oil imports.
In Africa, China has made major investments in oil-rich countries like Angola, Nigeria, and Sudan. Chinese companies help build roads, hospitals, and stadiums in exchange for long-term oil deals. In some cases, China also gives loans to governments and asks to be paid back in oil instead of money. This type of oil for infrastructure deal is a key part of China's global strategy. It helps China get energy while also gaining influence and goodwill in developing countries.
Another example is in the Middle East. China buys a large portion of its oil from countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Iraq. Even though the U.S. has traditionally been the main player in the region, China is now rising as a powerful customer and partner. In fact, in recent years, Saudi Arabia has sold more oil to China than to the United States. Some experts even believe that the future of Middle Eastern oil may depend more on Chinese demand than American policy.
And here's something very interesting. China is trying to change how oil is traded. Remember the petrodollar system we discussed earlier? China is now pushing for oil sales in yuan, its own currency, instead of US dollars. To support this, China launched its own oil futures market priced in yuan. This allows countries that trade with China to avoid the dollar and deal directly in Chinese currency. It's a big move that challenges the current global system.
But that's not all. China is also building its own strategic petroleum reserve, just like the US has. This is a large supply of oil stored underground in case of emergencies. If war breaks out, if shipping routes are blocked, or if prices rise too fast, China can release this oil to protect its economy. This shows how serious China is about energy security. It doesn't want to depend on others. It wants to control its own destiny in the energy world.
China's oil companies also play a huge role in this strategy. Major state-owned firms like CNPC, China National Petroleum Corporation, Sinopec, and CNOOC operate all around the world. These companies are backed by the Chinese government, and they work hand in hand with foreign policy. They are not just companies, they are tools of national strategy. In many countries, Chinese oil workers, engineers, and diplomats are all part of the same energy mission.
This level of coordination is unique. In most Western countries, companies work independently of the government. But in China, business and politics often move together. When China signs an oil deal, it may also offer loans, build schools, send doctors, or construct highways. This package approach makes China a strong competitor in many parts of the world. It helps China gain long-term access to oil while also improving its image as a global partner.
However, China's growing oil power also brings concerns. Some people worry that poor countries may become trapped in debt because they borrow too much from China. Others say that Chinese projects often use Chinese workers and materials, which means local communities don't benefit as much as they should. There are also fears that China may use its control over energy routes to gain political power over its partners in the future.
China also faces environmental challenges. As the world's largest oil importer and one of the biggest polluters, China must find a balance between energy growth and climate responsibility. The Chinese government has promised to move toward cleaner energy, and it's investing in solar and wind power more than any other country. But at the same time, oil and gas still make up a large part of China's economy and will continue to be important for many years.
So what does all of this mean for the world? China is no longer just a customer in the oil market. It is now a major player, shaping prices, trade routes, and even the future of oil currency. Its strategy is long-term, global, and deeply connected to its rise as a superpower. While the US still has more military power, China is building energy power, quietly, carefully, and with a plan that could shift the world order.
And now, dear listeners, we ask you, what do you think about China's role in the global oil game? Is China helping poor countries by investing in energy and development? Or is it creating a new form of control through debt and oil deals? Do you think the world is moving toward a new system, with China leading the way? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're listening from. We always love reading your opinions.
In the next section, we'll go beyond governments and companies. We'll talk about how oil affects ordinary people, how oil prices influence your daily life, why fuel costs rise and fall, and how this hidden war for energy reaches all of us, even if we don't realize it. Get ready for a powerful look at oil's impact on everyday people in every part of the world.
So far, we've explored oil from many angles: political, economic, and global. But now, we want to bring this topic closer to home. We want to show you how the war for oil doesn't just happen between countries or companies. It also affects you, your daily life, your family, and your community. Oil is not just something we hear about on the news. It is something that touches all of us every single day.
That's absolutely true, Adam. Oil is in our homes, our vehicles, our stores, and even our kitchens. It fuels cars and buses. It powers airplanes and ships. It runs the machines in factories that make clothes, shoes, electronics, and furniture. Even the food we eat depends on oil because farms use oil-powered machines and trucks deliver food using fuel. So when oil prices go up or down, almost everything in our lives becomes more expensive or more affordable.
Let's talk about one of the most visible effects: fuel prices. When the price of oil increases globally, gas stations raise the price of petrol and diesel. That means your transportation costs go up. If you drive to work or school, you feel it in your pocket. Taxi drivers, delivery workers, truck drivers, they all pay more for fuel, which means they either earn less or charge more for their services. Fuel price changes affect every person who moves.
And transportation doesn't stop there. Almost every product you use has traveled a long distance, from a farm or a factory to a store near you. That journey requires fuel. So when oil becomes more expensive, it costs more to move things. That means higher prices in stores. Groceries, clothes, electronics all become more expensive. This is how oil affects inflation, a rise in prices across the whole economy.
Now imagine the impact on countries that import oil. Many nations, especially developing ones, do not produce their own oil. They must buy it from abroad, using dollars or other currencies. When oil prices rise, these countries spend more of their national budget on fuel. That means they have less money for health, education, or social programs. Sometimes they even borrow money to pay for energy, creating debt problems.
In rich countries, people complain when gas prices go up. But in poorer nations, the consequences can be much worse. In some places, rising fuel prices lead to protests, strikes, or even government collapse. We've seen this in countries like Ecuador, Haiti, and Sri Lanka, where energy crises caused political chaos. The connection between oil prices and public stability is real and very powerful.
And don't forget electricity. In many parts of the world, electricity is produced using oil or gas. When fuel prices rise, the cost of electricity also rises. That affects businesses, schools, hospitals, and homes. If the government can't afford to keep power stations running, the result is blackouts. Without electricity, industries shut down, students can't study, and hospitals struggle to care for patients. Oil truly powers modern life.
Oil also affects jobs. When fuel is cheap, businesses can expand, transport goods, and lower prices. But when oil is expensive, many businesses struggle to survive. Transport companies, airlines, delivery services, they all feel the pressure. Workers may lose jobs. Wages may be cut. Consumers may stop buying. Oil affects not just the price of products, but also the strength of entire economies.
Then there's health and the environment. Burning oil releases harmful gases like carbon dioxide, which causes climate change. It also releases pollutants into the air, things like sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides, that harm human health. In big cities, traffic pollution causes asthma, lung disease, and heart problems. The poorest people often suffer the most because they live near highways or industrial zones.
And what about oil spills? When pipelines break or tankers leak, oil pollutes rivers, oceans, and land. Fish die, beaches are ruined, and local people lose their jobs. One major example is the Deepwater Horizon disaster in 2010, where a BP oil rig exploded and spilled millions of barrels of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. It took years to clean up, and the damage to the environment and local businesses was enormous.
So oil affects us in many ways: fuel, food, prices, jobs, health, and nature. But what can we do about it? That's a tough question. We can't simply stop using oil overnight. Our world is built around it. But we can become more aware. We can understand how the system works. We can use energy more wisely by walking or biking more, using public transport, turning off lights, and supporting clean energy when possible.
We can also raise our voices. We can ask governments to be transparent about energy policies. We can push for investments in solar, wind, and other renewables. We can support companies that are working toward cleaner technologies. And we can be ready to adapt, to prepare for a future where oil may no longer be the main source of energy. It's not just about global decisions. It's also about local action and personal responsibility.
And so, dear listeners, we ask you, how has oil touched your life? Have you ever struggled with high fuel prices? Have you seen pollution from traffic or industry in your city? Do you believe oil companies and governments are being fair and honest about energy? Please share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're listening from. We'd love to hear your story.
In our final episode, we will bring it all together. We'll ask the big questions. Who really controls the world's oil? And what can we do to build a fairer, cleaner energy future? We hope you'll join us for the final chapter of this powerful journey. The war for energy is not just about politics, it's about people. It's about you, me, and the world we share.
Welcome to the final part of our podcast, dear listeners. We've talked about history, politics, companies, wars, and everyday life. But now, it's time to look ahead. What is the future of oil? Will it continue to control the world as it has for over a century? Or are we entering a new energy era? And more importantly, can we build a world where energy is not just a source of power, but a path to justice, peace, and sustainability?
That's right, Adam. Oil has given the world incredible progress. It powered industries, lifted millions out of poverty, and helped countries grow. But it also brought wars, pollution, corruption, and inequality. As the world changes, people are now asking, can we do better? Can we build an energy system that is cleaner, fairer, and safer, not just for the rich and powerful, but for everyone?
The truth is, oil is still very important. As of today, around 80% of global energy still comes from fossil fuels: oil, coal, and natural gas. Even as we build solar panels and wind turbines, airplanes still fly on jet fuel, trucks run on diesel, and many power plants still burn oil. It takes time, money, and global cooperation to shift away from oil completely. But the journey has already begun.
Many countries have promised to reduce carbon emissions and fight climate change. The European Union plans to be carbon neutral by 2050. The United States is investing in clean energy. China, the world's largest energy user, is building solar farms and electric car factories. Even oil-rich countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are investing in green projects because they know the world is changing.
At the same time, many oil companies say they are changing too. Big firms like Shell, BP, and Total have announced plans to become energy companies, not just oil producers. They're investing in wind, solar, hydrogen, and carbon capture. Some are even setting goals to reach net zero emissions in the next few decades. But critics say many of these promises are just words, not real actions.
And that's a big question. Can we trust oil companies to lead the green transition? After decades of pollution and profit, should they be the ones designing the future? Or should governments, communities, and scientists lead the way? This is where the idea of energy justice becomes important. Energy justice means making sure the energy system is fair, both for people and for the planet.
Let's break that down. Energy justice has three parts. First, it means access. Everyone should have reliable and affordable energy. Today, more than 700 million people around the world still live without electricity. That's not fair. Second, it means protection. Communities should not suffer from pollution, oil spills, or toxic air. And third, it means participation. Ordinary people should have a say in how energy is produced and used.
In many countries, poor and indigenous communities are hurt the most by oil production. Their land is taken, their water is polluted, and their voices are ignored. If we want energy justice, that must change. People must be heard, respected, and included in decision-making. Clean energy should not just be for rich countries or big cities. It should reach everyone, no matter where they live or how much they earn.
And there's another issue: energy security. Today's world is still vulnerable to oil shocks. A war in one part of the world can cause fuel prices to rise everywhere. That's why many countries want energy systems that are local, stable, and renewable. Solar power from your rooftop or wind from your region can make your community stronger. You don't need to wait for oil tankers from halfway across the world.
But we also have to be realistic. The road to a clean and fair energy system will not be easy. Fossil fuel industries are huge, rich, and powerful. Many jobs still depend on oil, and clean energy systems must be built carefully, with respect for nature and human rights. Even mining for materials like lithium and cobalt, used in batteries, has risks. We must not repeat the same mistakes with new technologies.
That's why the most important tool in this energy future is education and awareness. People like you, our listeners, have a powerful role to play. You can ask questions. You can learn where your energy comes from. You can support clean energy, reduce waste, and use your voice to call for change. When people care, leaders listen. When people act, systems shift.
And we've seen examples of this. Young people around the world are leading climate movements. Cities are banning gas cars. Investors are moving their money out of oil companies. Farmers are using solar pumps. Villages are installing microgrids. Progress is happening. Not fast enough, but it is real. A new energy world is possible, and that world can be one of peace, not war, of equality, not greed.
So, dear listeners, we end this podcast with a simple question. What kind of future do you want? A future controlled by a few oil powers, or a future built on fairness and freedom? A planet poisoned by pollution, or a planet protected by clean energy? A system that divides, or one that includes and empowers all people? The choice is not only for presidents and CEOs, it's also for you, for me, for all of us.
Thank you for joining us on this deep and powerful journey through the world of oil. We hope you've learned something new. We hope you feel more informed. And we hope you're ready to keep asking questions and being part of the solution. Please share your thoughts in the comments, tell us where you're listening from, and let us know. What do you think about the future of oil?
Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the English Globe, and join us next time as we explore another big idea that shapes our world. Until then, stay curious, stay hopeful, and stay connected.